I bet you didn't know that the alliance between China and Russia is challenging U.S. global dominance. Today, we're diving into the escalating alliance between China and Russia as they openly challenge U.S. global dominance. While many believe the U.S. held unshakable power, this new partnership signals a dramatic shift. We'll explore the implications of this alliance and what it means for the future of international relations. The world has watched with bated breath as the partnership between China and Russia has deepened in recent years. This relationship has evolved from mere diplomatic niceties to a more robust and strategic alliance. This burgeoning alliance, while not a formal military pact, represents a significant shift in the global balance of power. It signals a new era of cooperation between two of the world's most influential nations. At its core, the China-Russia partnership is driven by a shared sense of grievance against what they perceive as U.S. hegemony. This mutual discontent has been a powerful catalyst for their growing closeness. Both nations, with their own historical experiences and geopolitical ambitions, have increasingly found common cause in challenging the existing world order. Their collaboration spans various sectors, including economic, military, and technological domains. Chinese President Xi Jinping's recent visit to Moscow for the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II underscored the solidity of this relationship. The visit was marked by grand ceremonies and significant diplomatic discussions. This visit, Xi's 11th since assuming power in 2013, served as a platform for both leaders to reiterate their commitment to a no-limits partnership. Their frequent meetings highlight the importance they place on this alliance. The symbolism of this meeting, held against the backdrop of Victory Day celebrations, was not lost on the international community. It was a clear message of their united front. This blossoming partnership is not a sudden phenomenon. It has been years in the making, with both nations gradually aligning their policies and strategies. It is rather the culmination of years of growing convergence between Moscow and Beijing. Their shared interests have brought them closer together, creating a formidable alliance. Both nations have experienced periods of tension with the West, particularly with the United States. These tensions have only served to strengthen their resolve to work together. Both have faced criticism and sanctions for their domestic and foreign policies. These shared challenges have further solidified their partnership. This shared sense of being targeted by the West has undoubtedly strengthened their resolve to forge a united front. Their alliance is a strategic response to external pressures. The China-Russia partnership, however, is not merely a marriage of convenience. It is a well-thought-out alliance based on mutual respect and shared goals. It is underpinned by a shared vision of a multipolar world, one where power is more diffuse and where their respective voices carry greater weight. This vision is central to their strategic objectives. This vision stands in stark contrast to what they perceive as the U.S. pursuit of unipolarity, a world order where Washington continues to call the shots. They seek a more balanced global power structure. This fundamental difference in worldview has laid the foundation for a strategic partnership that has the potential to reshape the geopolitical landscape. Their alliance is a significant force in the evolving global order. The joint statement issued by Xi and Putin following their meeting in Moscow was striking for its blunt criticism of the United States. The language used was unusually direct, highlighting the growing tensions between these global powers. Both leaders took aim at what they termed certain countries, a thinly veiled reference to the U.S. and its allies. This pointed critique was a clear indication of their dissatisfaction with the current global order. They accused these actors of attempting to rewrite the history of World War II, downplaying the sacrifices made by China and Russia in the fight against fascism. This narrative is deeply embedded in the national identities of both countries. This shared narrative of historical revisionism serves as a powerful rallying cry, uniting both nations against a perceived common enemy. It fosters a sense of solidarity and mutual purpose. Central to their critique was the accusation that the U.S. is clinging to a Cold War mentality, seeking to divide the world into blocs and reassert its dominance. This mentality, they argue, is outdated and counterproductive. They pointed to NATO expansion as a prime example of this, arguing that the military alliance's eastward march towards Russia's borders is a destabilizing force in Europe. This expansion is seen as a direct threat to their national security. This expansion, they contend, is a relic of a bygone era, a dangerous provocation that undermines peace and stability. It exacerbates tensions and fosters an environment of mistrust. Furthermore, both leaders condemn the U.S. for its efforts to create small circles or exclusive alliances in the Asia-Pacific region. These actions are viewed as attempts to isolate and contain China. This, they argued, is a transparent attempt to contain China's rise and maintain American hegemony in the region. The economic and military maneuvers are seen as part of a broader strategy to limit China's influence. They view such actions as antithetical to the spirit of multilateralism and a threat to regional stability. The emphasis on exclusive alliances undermines broader cooperative efforts. The joint statement was not merely a laundry list of grievances, it was a comprehensive critique of the current global order and a call for significant changes. It also laid out a vision for a more just and equitable world order. This vision seeks to address the imbalances and injustices they perceive in the current system. This new order, they argued, must be based on the principles of the UN Charter, respect for national sovereignty, and non-interference in the internal affairs of other states. These principles are seen as foundational for a fairer world. This vision, while light on specifics, represents a direct challenge to the existing world order, one that they believe is skewed in favor of the United States and its allies. It calls for a rethinking of global governance structures. Beyond their broad criticisms of U.S. foreign policy, Xi and Putin also leveled specific accusations against Washington. They accused the U.S. of acting unilaterally on the world stage, bypassing international institutions and norms. This disregard for multilateralism, they claimed, is evident in the U.S. quote, S propensity to act without UN Security Council authorization, particularly in the realm of military interventions. The U.S. quote, S use of economic sanctions came under particularly harsh criticism. Both China and Russia, having experienced the brunt of American sanctions, condemned their use as a form of economic warfare. They argued that sanctions, often imposed unilaterally and without international consensus, are a violation of international law and cause undue harm to civilian populations. The U.S. quote, S Indo-Pacific strategy was also singled out for criticism. Both leaders view this strategy, which seeks to bolster U.S. alliances and partnerships in the region, as a thinly veiled attempt to contain China's rise. They argued that the strategy is inherently divisive and risks escalating tensions in the region. Finally, Xi and Putin accused the U.S. of hypocrisy. They pointed to Washington's rhetoric on democracy and human rights, arguing that the U.S. often fails to live up to its own ideals. They cited U.S. support for authoritarian regimes and its own domestic challenges as evidence of this double standard. This accusation of hypocrisy, while not new, resonates in many parts of the world where the U.S. is seen as wielding its power selectively. The condemnation of U.S. sanctions by China and Russia highlights a growing debate about the legitimacy and effectiveness of this foreign policy tool. These two nations argue that sanctions are often used as a means of coercion rather than a legitimate response to international misconduct. The U.S. has increasingly relied on sanctions to punish and deter what it perceives as malign behavior by state and non-state actors. This approach has been a cornerstone of American foreign policy for decades, aiming to exert pressure without resorting to military action. From North Korea's nuclear ambitions to Iran's nuclear program to Russia's annexation of Crimea, sanctions have become a go-to instrument in the U.S. quote, S foreign policy toolkit. These measures are intended to isolate and weaken regimes that defy international norms. However, the growing use of sanctions has not been without controversy. Many argue that these measures often miss their mark and instead harm ordinary citizens. Critics argue that sanctions often fail to achieve their intended objectives and can cause unintended humanitarian consequences. They highlight the suffering of civilians who bear the brunt of economic restrictions. They point to the example of Iraq in the 1990s, where UN sanctions, while targeting Saddam Hussein's regime, also inflicted significant hardship on the Iraqi people. The sanctions led to widespread poverty and suffering, raising ethical questions about their use. Furthermore, critics argue that the unilateral imposition of sanctions by the U.S. often bypassing the UN Security Council, undermines international law and norms. This approach is seen as a way for the U.S. to impose its will without global consensus. They contend that such actions create a dangerous precedent, allowing powerful states to act with impunity and erode the rules-based international order. This could lead to a more fragmented and unstable global environment. The debate over sanctions is likely to intensify in the coming years. As global power dynamics shift, the effectiveness and morality of sanctions will continue to be hotly contested. As the U.S. and its allies increasingly resort to sanctions to counter a range of threats, from terrorism to cyber attacks to human rights abuses, the chorus of criticism from countries like China and Russia is likely to grow louder. This will add further complexity to international relations. This debate raises fundamental questions about the future of global governance and the use of economic power in international relations. How the world navigates these issues will shape the geopolitical landscape for years to come.